So what happens when a sworn testimony, the very bedrock of a criminal case, just completely shatters? Today, we're going to dive into a Supreme Court case that's built on a single, really shocking contradiction. A story that forces us all to ask, what can the law actually do when it's faced with a deliberate lie?
At the absolute heart of this case are two statements from the very same person that just cannot both be true. First, in a formal police report, she says, "I was raped." Then, later, under oath in court, "I had not been raped." This one contradiction right there ignited a legal firestorm that went all the way to the Supreme Court.
And this really gets to the core question we're going to explore. When the entire foundation of a serious criminal case, the victim's own testimony, completely falls apart, what's the court's responsibility? What can it do? And maybe more importantly, what should it do?
So how did we get to this point? Let's rewind and go right back to the beginning to see how this story first came to light and then how it also dramatically unraveled.
Okay, it all starts back in January 1993. A young woman files a formal police report, an FIR, saying she was raped by two men. Now, based on her statement, the police go ahead and arrest them. But then, when the case actually gets to trial, she does a complete 180. She testifies that she was never raped and even denies filing the report in the first place. Well, with the main testimony gone, the court really has no choice. In 2001, the men are acquitted.
But the acquittal? That wasn't the final chapter, not by a long shot. The judge saw something more going on here than just a withdrawn accusation. The court came to the conclusion that the petitioner had intentionally given false evidence, and that shifted the focus from one alleged crime to a completely different one, a crime against the justice system itself.
And just like that, the entire focus of the case pivots. It's no longer about the initial accusation of rape, it's now about the act of lying under oath. The lie itself was officially on trial.
This brings us to the specific charge, perjury. Now, under Section 191 of the Indian Penal Code, this isn't just telling a small fib. It is a serious crime. It means you are legally bound to tell the truth, like when you're under oath, and then you knowingly make a false statement, specifically with the intent to mislead the court.
So once the court flagged this as potential perjury, it had to figure out what to do about it. And it turns out the law provides two very different ways to handle this. Let's take a look at them.
Okay, so you can think of it like the court has two tools in its toolbox here. On one side, you've got Section 344. This is a fast summary procedure. It's really designed for those clear-cut, totally obvious cases of perjury. But the trade-off is a much lighter punishment, a max of 3 months in jail. On the other side is Section 340, which is the ordinary, much slower path. This involves a whole new trial and can lead to a way harsher sentence, up to 7 years. So you can see why the choice between them is so critical.
But here's the thing. To use that faster summary procedure, the court couldn't just act on a whim. No way. It had to pass a really strict three-part test. First, was the lie intentional? Second, was punishing it absolutely necessary for the sake of justice? And third, did the witness get a fair chance to explain themselves? All three of those boxes had to be checked.
This whole complex legal journey, as you can imagine, didn't just stop there. It escalated all the way to the Supreme Court. So let's take a look at how the nation's highest court weighed in and delivered its final, decisive word on the matter. The Supreme Court's focus becomes crystal clear when you read its own words. It highlighted the huge amount of harm that was done to the two falsely accused men, noting they suffered the ignominy, that's the public shame and disgrace, of this entire ordeal. In this part of the story, the court clearly saw them as the victims.
The court also zoomed out. It started looking at the bigger picture here. It declared that perjury had become an alarming problem, like a poison in the justice system. So this judgment wasn't just about one person. It was a powerful call to action for all courts to fight this evil a lot more effectively.
So in the end, the Supreme Court upheld the perjury conviction. It found that the trial court had followed the law to the letter, checking all three of those mandatory boxes. The lie was intentional, the punishment was necessary for justice, and the petitioner had her chance to explain. The verdict stood.
But this judgment wasn't just an endpoint. In many ways, it was a beginning. It set a really powerful precedent that continues to influence Indian law even today. So let's fast forward and see how its impact has evolved over time.
So in 2008, this case, Mahila Vinod Kumari, becomes a landmark. And you might ask why? Well, because it sent a very clear message. When someone blatantly lies under oath and causes serious harm, the courts have a fast and effective tool to hold them accountable. It was like drawing a line in the sand against weaponizing the justice system.
But you know, the law is never static. It doesn't just sit still. What works for a clear-cut case might not be right for a more complicated one. Let's fast forward 16 years to 2024, and a new case, James Kunjwal, forced the court to revisit this whole issue and add a crucial layer of nuance to the standard that was set all the way back in 2008.
This 2024 ruling added some really important guardrails. The court basically said, hold on, not every contradiction is a malicious lie. To prove perjury now, you have to show the lie was deliberate, not just an honest mistake. It has to be about something central to the case, and, this is key, you have to prove it was done in bad faith. This is such a vital distinction because it's designed to protect witnesses, especially victims of trauma, whose memories might be fragmented or inconsistent, without letting intentional liars off the hook.
And that brings us to the final, critical question this whole legal journey leaves us with. It's the ultimate balancing act, right? How can our justice system demand and enforce truthfulness, which it absolutely has to have to function, while at the same time creating a safe space for genuine victims whose trauma can often lead to confusion and inconsistency? That is the massive challenge the courts continue to face.